Second. Okay. So hi, my name is Shani Evenstein. I'm from Israel, and I'm very happy to have Andrew Lih today from the US to talk about his Wiki in education experience. So Andrew, why don't you introduce yourself to those who don't know you? There are not so many who don't know you, but to the new guys on the block.
Yeah, so my name is Andrew Lih. I'm also known as user Fuzzheado on English Wikipedia. And I've been editing Wikipedia since 2003. So I'm one of the older folks on Wikipedia. I've also the odd distinction of having been to every Wikimedian conference ever since 2005. So I definitely am quite ensconced in the community by now. I've also written a book about Wikipedia called The Wikipedia Revolution: How a Bunch of Nobodies Created the World's Greatest Encyclopedia. And I'm quite happy to hear that no Wikipedian has ever said to me they were offended by being called a nobody. I think we kind of take pride in the fact that we are kind of all nobodies, but we've created something amazing out of nothing. So I've been using Wikipedia in the classroom ever since I discovered Wikipedia in 2003 when I was teaching at the University of Hong Kong. And a few months after I first saw Wikipedia and said, you know, this shouldn't be good, but it is quite good, I decided to use it as an experiment in one assignment for my class with 80 students in journalism and communications. And I decided to put them onto Wikipedia to edit articles about something they were knowledgeable about, which is Hong Kong history and landmarks. And, you know, can you imagine back in 2003, Wikipedia being fairly small and fairly unknown to the rest of the internet, that you had 80 students hop on there overnight, and suddenly the editing activity was very noticeable from 80 new people. So the community was very kind back then and accepted the students fairly well, even though they were making mistakes and there were copyright violations and all kinds of things going wrong. But it was a much nicer environment back then compared to today. And it's understandable. It wasn't as popular as it was as it is now. So was less risk in having incorrect or erroneous information back then. So that was back in 2003. And actually CNN took notice of that and did a story on my class in July 2003. And it was, according to Jimmy Wales, on something he posted to the mailing list later that month, it was the first ever televised news story in English that he had ever seen about Wikipedia. So that's pretty amazing that that was my class in 2003 as being the first televised, you know, English language story about Wikipedia, especially on CNN. It got a lot of play. So that's kind of my background on using Wikipedia starting back in 2003. And today at American University in Washington, D.C., I have a class every year called Wikipedia and Public Knowledge, where we explore Wikipedia as this blending between the historical record and the news cycle. And we can talk more about that.
Yes, so certainly you're one of the veterans in the community and doing lots of stuff. And today I really wanted to focus about your Wiki experience in the classroom. So I think it's, first of all, quite amazing that you have 13 years of experience doing exactly that, experimenting, using Wikipedia as a teaching tool. And let's begin with some specifics. So today you have your course at the university. How many students do you have?
So I'm lucky that it's no longer 80 students. That's quite a bit to handle, especially when we didn't have a lot of tools to handle 80 students. Fortunately, I had a teacher's assistant back then who could go through all the edits and look at what was going on, but it's quite tough. But today my classes are more in the area of 15 to 18 students. And this class called Wikipedia and Public Knowledge is exploring the space which I first started describing maybe 8 or 10 years ago, about how Wikipedia really fills in this unique knowledge gap that we've always had. So if you imagine the world that we had before Wikipedia, we had the news media cover something in newspapers and television and radio, and then if it doesn't have a long, drawn out story, it kind of falls off the radar screen very quickly. And then maybe weeks or months or years later, it gets written up in an encyclopedia or a book or a documentary is made about it, but there's actually this big, long lull, this gap of knowledge between when it shows up in a newspaper and radio and television and when it actually makes it to the historical record. And for me, my favorite example of this knowledge gap being a problem is something like Watergate. So I grew up in this era where Watergate was just breaking, but slowly, right? It started off as what they call a 2-bit robbery at the Watergate Hotel. It started to unravel more and more till you found out that there was CIA involved with this, that the White House officials were involved with this, that people quit over the investigation, and it finally made it all the way up to the White House as being complicit in this whole thing. But this story lasted a long time, over years, and it had a slow burn. And if you kind of came out of the woods, halfway into the story after a year of camping, you would not be able to make sense of the story. You'd have to go back and read all the old newspaper clippings and everything. So I'm very envious of this generation now that we have, where Wikipedia now fills this knowledge gap because it is this continuously edited, collaborative writing of history that is ever present and ever growing, right? So this is something that I like to explore more with my students to understand how Wikipedia is reacting to and documenting things in real time, and that there is no such thing as the historical record that's written down the path later on. In fact, Wikipedia is serving this role both as covering the news and live writing history at the same time. And this is something I'm very envious of for this generation. And if you think about it, it's really fascinating that students entering college today have never known a world without Wikipedia, right? They're about 3 or 4 years old when Wikipedia was started. It got popular probably when they were in elementary school. So they've never had this knowledge gap or this big hole in their knowledge that a lot of us who are older remember. And when we saw Wikipedia, we saw this as a revelation, right? Saying that any topic under the sky, I can look up the Wikipedia article and understand the state of affairs as it is right now, as things are happening. And that's just amazing to think about that. And I'm also fascinated with the psyche of students today. Like, if they've never known this contrast between not knowing and then having Wikipedia to fill in this knowledge gap, how does that affect their relationship with the historical record? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out myself, but I find it a fascinating question.
Yeah. So one of the things that I mean, you're one of the lucky ones for various reasons that will become very clear as we continue this conversation. But the first reason why you're very lucky is that you have a full semester with the students, which is, I think, quite a privilege not all educators have.
Right.
So why don't you go through how the curriculum is built? How do you divide the time? I understand that you're doing a 15 weeks course, plus minus. So can you talk a bit about the structure and the type of assignments you give to students, and we'll continue from there.
Right. So my class is a 15-week class. It is 2.5 hours per week. And this is mainly upperclassmen, so people in their 3rd or 4th year. We have a few grad students, so you can be an advanced undergrad or a graduate student and take my class. And the whole idea is to spend the first 5 weeks becoming as expert a Wikipedia editor as we can possibly make them. And then for the last 10 weeks, we do an edit-a-thon with a different Glam institution, right? A galleries, libraries, archives, museums, or a cultural institution in Washington, D.C. For 5 sessions, so pretty much every other week for 10 weeks. And this really is trying to take advantage of the fact that we're in Washington, D.C. We have one of the highest concentrations of world-class museums and curators in this one little space in D.C., right? The National Mall, which has, Smithsonian Museums, has National Archives, has Library of Congress, really amazing, amazing resources. And in the last 5 years, we just found that with Wikipedia, it's no longer if these folks are interested in Wikipedia, but we're just having tons of interest from them. We've really turned the corner on Wikipedia being a strange and unreliable source on the internet to being one of the most important educational resources on the internet, and seeing that there are culture professionals that now see that their missions are completely aligned with the free culture mission of Wikipedia, and they're trying to find ways to work with Wikipedians to increase the quality of content. And that's something that's really refreshing to see, especially here in DC. We actually have so much interest in working with Wikipedia that from my class, where we only get 5 sessions or 5 editathons that we do with my students, then we actually have to turn a lot of these institutions away, saying maybe we can work together next year because we are fully booked in terms of having these editathons this semester.
Yes, so being in DC is certainly the second reason why you are very much lucky and I think privileged. So I think your program that you're running in DC is quite unique in that sense, and something people around the world may aspire to, even on a smaller scale. And this is important because this broadcast is not only to somehow learn from your experience, but also to maybe help program leaders around the world who try to, to run education programs in all sorts of places. And some of them don't have a full semester. Some of them have,
Right.
1 session in a semester or 2 if they are lucky. So can you talk about, because I know that you've experimented so much. You've had all types of modules you've used trying to teach with Wikipedia. So what would you recommend to those who don't have a whole semester?
Right. For a lot of folks who maybe have a partial semester or even just a few weeks to work with, I'm a big fan of jumping in with both feet. So I know a lot of the best practices for Wiki Education program or Wiki Education Foundation is to do a lot of editing in your sandbox and maybe moving articles into the Wikipedia space and using articles for creation to negotiate the creation of articles with folks. This is not for everyone, but I'm a much bigger fan of learning how to swim by diving into the deep end of the pool. Now, not everyone has an administrator as an instructor like I do. So if something really goes wrong, not only can I go in as administrator and kind of fix things very quickly, but I also have a certain stature in the community if I kind of tell folks who see things my students are doing wrong, and I can kind of go up to them and say, hey, give us another few days, we'll figure this out. And a lot of editors will see that I'm an experienced editor in Wikipedia and say, okay, I'll assume even better faith than good faith and give you the time to do that. So I understand that not all the classes have that luxury. But another thing I'd also recommend to folks is maybe consider exercises that are not necessarily direct editing of Wikipedia. If you only have 1 assignment maybe, or maybe 2 weeks, it's very hard to get into the weeds of the policies of Wikipedia, like NPOV, verifiability, reliable sources, neutrality, all these things. And then get into the mechanics of editing Wikipedia, and then having the time to learn that, edit, and then having the community react to it in a meaningful way. That takes some time. So one of the exercises that we did in our 15 weeks that might be useful for a class is simply to just analyze Wikipedia articles by looking at how did the article get into the state that it's in now? What are the most interesting or pivotal episodes in the evolution of an article, right? You could even pre-choose some of these articles that you know the answer to already. Or you might want to choose some that are very big and very, have a long history and see what students find inside there. So this is sometimes what we call backtracking of articles, but also to analyze the traffic patterns of the articles and find out how they relate to the news cycle. And that's something I do a lot of in my first few weeks, is to look at breaking news articles in Wikipedia. So if I were looking at one now, it'd be like the Brussels bombing, which had a lot of traffic in the early days, and then analyze how that relates to what people were searching for on Google, or look at Google Trends to see that. And I do that a lot just to show students that Wikipedia tracks very closely with what people are searching for and the relationship between Google and Wikipedia. Another thing I would recommend looking into as well is seeing what kind of ways you can engage content experts or knowledge domain experts in improving Wikipedia content. So one exercise that we did recently was not to necessarily edit an article in Wikipedia, but to draw on the expertise of an expert to critique a Wikipedia article. So one editathon, we actually had the world's expert on this particular statue called the Greek slave. So this is at the American Art Museum, and we had the curator, Karen Lemmy, there. And we said, we only have an hour in this editathon. I'm not sure we could teach her about all the Wikipedia policies and what's reliable sourcing and how to deconstruct an article, but we said, let's get what we can of her critiquing a Wikipedia article. And we told her this beforehand, saying, if you could take a look at the Wikipedia article, we'd like to have you do a 10 or 15-minute critique. of the article. So at the edit-a-thon, we turned on a video camera and we had her show on the big screen on the projector, her analysis of the Wikipedia article saying, oh, the first sentence is wrong. You don't do this with a statue. So we were kind of nervous saying, oh my gosh, the first sentence is not even correct in this article. And we had this world's expert look at Wikipedia and saying, oh, this is bad. So she told us exactly how to write it. And she said, even in art history, not a lot of people know about how statues are made. So if I were you, here's how I would write it. I would say the cast or the model was first made in clay, and then it was copied over to a plaster cast, and then it was cast in bronze, and copies were made. So there is no original statue. There's actually a model, and then there are copies made off that model. So that was great. That's exactly what should be in that first sentence in the Wikipedia article. And we actually have a recorded 10, 15 minutes on video as a memorial of this critique. And then we uploaded that video to Commons, and it's actually now on the talk page of the article called The Greek Slave. And even though we couldn't do all the edits she suggested 1 hour, we actually had people come in after the edit-a-thon was over to watch the video and then correct the article based on those recommendations. In fact, the article reads a lot better today than it does than that day, based on her critique. Now, the funny thing about this is that you think that after that critique, where she said, okay, the first sentence is wrong, she would follow up that critique by saying, and here's why no one should use Wikipedia and why it's terrible. But in fact, she actually was a big fan of Wikipedia. And the reason why is because as the top scholar on this statue and the artist Hiram Powers, she found out about a cache of letters that Hiram Powers had wrote that she didn't even know about. And the reason why she found out about this was because of Wikipedia, which had a pointer or a link to the University of Vermont's Center for Digital Initiatives library collection. And she would not have known about that cache of letters if it wasn't for Wikipedia. So the funny thing is, on one hand, she said there's problems with the basic article. But on the other hand, she said Wikipedia proved so useful as being this academic hub where people come together and libraries link out of it and academics go there to read it. And people upload images and people add to it. And this is what we kind of call the piranha effect. At least that's what the French Wikipedians call it. Is that you have this hub of activity that winds up being better than any one entity out there. And I think that really shows the power of Wikipedia, that even the critics who can give you feedback to improve it, find really great ways that it has served them in their study and in their field.
Yeah, that's quite amazing. And I think there are a few really important things that come up from what you've just said. The first is making sure that you give the right assignment, or in terms of length and in terms of depth, maybe also to, considering the amount of time that you have with students.
Right.
So if you have a shorter session, make sure that you do. It doesn't have to be really long. You don't have to teach everything if you don't have time. And the second was engage with experts, which is really, again, we're gonna talk about Glam a bit more in a second, because that's a really important thing you're doing, converging both education and Glam together, which makes a lot of sense. But before we do that, before we go to talk about the editathons and all your work with Glams, I'm curious how if you can tell us a bit about how those first 5 weeks look like, what it is that you ask students to do, how do you monitor what it is that they do? Because again, our mission is to help other educators copy or follow up in their countries, in their programs.
Right. So one of the things I get them to do right away, obviously, is create an account, but also to turn on all the preferences I think should be default, at least in English Wikipedia. So we're a very conservative community in general, right? So the settings you get when you log into Wikipedia are almost the same ones you got 10 years ago. And anything that is useful or neat or cool or really innovative are all little options you have to turn on yourself, because in general, the older, more established editors don't like change, and unfortunately, anything you need, or anything you want to turn on that's innovative has to be done manually. So I go into preferences and I say, turn on Hotcat, which allows you to add categories much easier. Turn on these extra menus that give you options to look at article stats or the traffic patterns or the traffic stats, or to check external links and things like that. Go in and turn on the hover cards feature. So when you put your mouse on top of something, things are. And the funny thing is, at first class, when I tell them to do this, you can see the students get really excited. They're like, "Oh my God, it's like I'm getting a secret tour of Wikipedia. I wish these features were on by default." And I said, "Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's up to me to show you these secret features because we don't turn those on." So just getting those activated was really great. Now, fortunately, visual editor is now on by default in English Wikipedia, so at least it's a little bit easier to get people to that feature. But I still teach them wiki markup by having them go to the Wikipedia Adventure, which is a little bit older now, but still very useful. It was a tool done by Jake Horlowitz through a grant. It's a nice general introduction to some of the principles of Wikipedia. And then before I really get them deep into the editing of Wikipedia, I try to teach them about all the metadata that you can look at, right? So just looking at the view history tab is pretty overwhelming if you don't have someone else walk you through it, right? So I show them how to do a diff between two versions, to look at the byte counts, whether they're going up or down, show them the thank button, the other things that you can do through that interface. So that's just an introduction to that basic interface for Wikipedia, have them turn on all these extra features that make it a lot more useful for folks. And then I get them to edit 3 things that they're knowledgeable about. So I think it's most important is to make sure that you choose a knowledge domain that they know of quite well. So I normally ask them to edit about their hometown and get as specific as possible. Not Chicago, Illinois, but the town that's smallest that you can find that's near you. Get them to edit an area of academic study they're interested in, so something in their major or something they're studying now in another class, and something in popular culture they're interested in. So this is either music, film, opera, something like that. So they can see the different types of dynamics you see in like geographic or location articles versus academic articles versus pop culture articles, just to see what they think about Wikipedia's treatment of each of these, because these are things that they know something about. So that's my first assignment. And for any assignment, I always get them to reflect on our class blog, including the diffs that they have made changes. So I don't try to just get them to register on some well-known tools like the Education Extension and the dashboard from Wiki Education Foundation, although I do use those. But I really depend on them to self-report and to demand reflection by asking them open-ended questions. So for example, I might ask them, what did you find that was accurate in the article about your hometown but didn't have references? Or what are things that you know are true but you couldn't find references for, and what role should that play in the article? Show me your diffs. Show me what you found. And those are really good ways to bring out their critical thinking, I think. I think just editing Wikipedia on its own is not enough. You need that reflection part, and for them to really analyze deeply how their understanding of a topic meshes with Wikipedia's demand for verifiability and all the policies on top of it. And then we'll see quite quickly how students who might be intimidated by all those rules now suddenly understand why all those rules and policies are there, because they want to make sure that the best information gets into Wikipedia, and only through those policies and practices will you get there.
Certainly. So again, those 5 first weeks where you tell them to go through 3, I think again it makes a lot of sense to let them edit about things that they are close to them, that they know, their hometown, pop culture, the things that they study. Allows you to through all of it teach them all the critical issues of neutral point of view, notability, etc. But again, you ask them stuff as an educator, you need to somehow follow it. So can you tell us a bit about how you actually monitor the work? Because I think that's a major issue for everybody who is trying to do any type of work with Wikipedia.
Right. So the nice thing is that the Wiki Education dashboard now is a pretty nice tool. It allows you to register all the students in there, and then all the articles that they're working on. So you now have kind of a very consolidated view of the overall editing patterns of your students in there. So I will go in there and look at the diffs that are specified by the students when they are reflecting on their edits, but I also will go in there individually and look at their diffs, outside of the ones that they mentioned as well. Yeah, so that's something that, if you are pretty adept at using browser tabs, then sometimes I will go in there and just, command tab or command click about 50 or 100 times to just load them all up on a screen and start going through them. There's no easy way to inspect them all. You kind of have to do it by hand. But if you get some experience at doing that, it's not too bad.
So I think that's a really important thing that you're saying. You are using a technical tool, and it's worth mentioning that since you're in the US, you can use, again, the dashboard that was developed by the Wiki Foundation. Folks who are doing work around the world, or most of them are still using the Wikipedia education extension.
Right.
And we are now in the process of converting the dashboard to other languages as well. So hopefully that will help people to monitor students' work. But in our pre-interview, you mentioned another tool you're using, and again, it's a powerful tool. So why don't you talk to us about that one as well?
Which tool is this?
The one that helps you see all the. I don't remember the name.
Oh, you mean Rebschool?
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, this is a great segue into this. So one of the things that's new from this past year, if you wind up using this, you're actually on the cutting edge. This was first described to the rest of the community, I believe, in Wikimania in 2015 in Mexico City. It was very, very new. Wiki Conference USA in DC, we had Aaron Halfacker from the Wikimedia Foundation and Lego KTM, I believe, talk about this new tool, which was originally meant to provide a machine learning algorithm and engine for detecting vandalism in Wikipedia articles. But it's a very generic system that allows for this machine learning algorithm to basically understand the contents of articles and then like the difference between contents of articles. So one of the things that they support also is automated classification of articles to one of the levels of evaluation, like C class, B class, good article, start article, or sub article. And before we had this tool, this is always done by hand. If you ever go to the talk page of a article in English Wikipedia, at least, you will see that it says this is a C class article, or this is a stub article, or this is a start article. And a lot of those ratings can be very stale. They might have been done a year or two ago, yet when you look at the talk page, they're still reflecting the state of the article from a while back. So one of the neat things about this tool, which is called Rebschool, or the system that they have that you can give it a revision of a Wikipedia article, and it spits back its prediction of whether it's a start, stub, B class, C class article. It's called ORES, O-R-E-S. I believe it stands for Objective Revision Evaluation Score. And the great thing about this is it gives you instant feedback on your article depending on the edits that you made immediately before that. And this is not a perfect thing, right? It doesn't necessarily fact check or do all these things, but it does look at things like how many references do you have? How many paragraphs do you have? How many sections do you have? Are they well-constructed sentences? How many references do you have per paragraph? So some very basic indicators about length and quality that we know from other articles. This is why it's a machine learning algorithm. And it's great because we actually did an experiment in class where at the beginning, I got students to choose an article they were working on that was at start class or below, meaning that was very, very low quality. And they ran it through the ORES tool, O-R-E-S, and it also evaluated as a start class. And I said, okay, for the next 90 minutes, let's try to get this article up to a better quality. I'm not sure what it's going to be because we never used this tool before other than for this experiment. So they started doing things like copy editing the article, adding more information from other websites. They added more references. Some even added images. They created more sections. They rewrote the lead. So grammar and these types of things come into play as well for the objective revision score. And then after 20 minutes, we did a rev score check. After 40 minutes, we did a rev score check. And at the very end, I believe we found that 30 to 40 of the students could move the whole article from a start class to a C class article. That's pretty amazing. I think one even got it to the next level, which is B class article, by adding a lot of information from another existing article over to Wikipedia, to that article that they're working on. So it was really interesting seeing that the students eyes kind of lit up. Oh, this is great. This is almost like a game where they can actually, every 20 minutes resubmit the article to ORES and see if it went up a class. Oh, it didn't? Okay, let me edit some more and add some more stuff. And then you could see at the very end, a lot of these students could look at it and go, my God, this is great. I moved it all up a whole class. Before we had this tool, you'd had to just contact another article editor and say, hey, could you take a look at this and tell me whether I did a better job than before? And it's kind of interesting to see that we now have a tool that can kind of give us instant feedback, not on all aspects of the article, but just at least the overall quality in terms of length and references and structure. And I think there's some really interesting things we could do with this in terms of editathons and motivating a new set of contributors to take part in Wikipedia. And I know that traditionally our community is not really like the gamification or putting a gameplay aspect into Wikipedia. A lot of purists really think that editing Wikipedia should not be a game. It's just a serious academic endeavor. But I think we really need to start looking at other ways of engagement, not just gaming things, to give people positive reinforcement and to get their buy-in into staying in this space to contribute more. Because I think right now, we are still very old-fashioned in thinking about how to engage users to stay and edit Wikipedia.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and we'll touch on gamification in just hopefully in a few minutes. But before we do that, I think you make a really strong case about how technical tools of sorts can help the process in class and how it helps improve the experience of students, not only for us as educators who run it, but of course for the students themselves to see the actual change in what it is that they're doing and what they're working on and get instant feedback, which is crucial. And on that note, it's also important to note, again, for the folks who are not from the US, from around the world, English Wikipedia has a rating system, not all Wikipedia, a rating system of articles quality. Not all Wikipedias have them. Hebrew Wikipedia doesn't have them, for instance. So even if you are from a smaller Wikipedia and you don't have the rating system, you might do it again manually. But you can look at those things, such as how many references do we have, how many paragraphs, is it well structured, and again, I think as a global community, it's really crucial that we do get the tools that we need to do a better job. Something that will save us a lot of time and give students instant feedback on their work. So developing those tools is crucial, really. So apart from these tools, we've been talking about how you divide the semester. The first third of it is initial steps and opening a user and changing all the configurations and start editing right away on things that students know and have some knowledge on. But the two other thirds of the semester, again, I think you're quite lucky to be in DC and to have so many wonderful GLAMs, cultural institutions that you can work with. And you're certainly, I think, doing something amazing. Every week, right? Every other week, you have some kind of editathon. So can you tell us a bit about how that works, how you prepare for it? Do you go to the GLAM itself, or do you bring curators in class? Go through that, go through the process so others can learn from it as well.
Right, so one of the designs of this class was to take advantage of our location in Washington, DC. So even though we have this really privileged spot, we actually found a lot of students either didn't have the time or the reason to go to our dozens of world-class museums here. So one of the things that I found was useful was to actually make each of these editathons a real field trip for the students. So we're at American University based, about 30 minutes north of the Washington National Mall, which is where all these museums are congregated. So though we're not right next door to it, we're very close. So my class is 2.5 hours each week. So it takes about a half an hour to get down there and a half hour to get back. So we only have about 90 minutes of usable time with these organizations. If students can get there early, we usually have about 15, 20 minutes with the curators to do either a behind the scenes tour or for them to show us something that they're working on that the public doesn't get to see yet. So that's something that we really liked about this, is the students feeling that they get to see something the public doesn't always get to see. In addition to, at the edit-a-thon, to be sitting down with curators and museum professionals that the public also never gets to interact with. And the dynamic has really changed since 2010, when Glam started to have its breakout era in the Wikipedia movement, or the Wikimedia movement. And we now have more demand than we actually have slots for these edit-a-thons with museums. At Wikimedia DC, we're the most active chapter in the US, and most of it is oriented around Glam. We have a lot of employees of the Smithsonian, National Archives, and Library of Congress involved with the Wikimedia DC chapter. If there's ever kind of one theme you could say Wikimedia DC is based around, it is Glam. And we had, just in February, we had 10 edit-a-thons in 1 month. One day last year, we had 3 edit-a-thons in 1 day that were all overlapping, which was kind of crazy. We had my class, which was on the afternoon of a Tuesday. Believe it or not, we had one at the White House right after that one, which was with the Chief Technical Officer of the United States. And then we also had one with National Public Radio. So they're all kind of overlapping, which just shows you how incredibly busy we are in DC engaging Glam entities, because now there's so much interest in working with Wikipedia, which is a good thing, I suppose. So we have our students go down there, and we usually work with curators on topics that we have worked on before, or at least I worked on before, maybe about 4 weeks beforehand, to identify topics of interest that could be worked on by the museum. Sometimes they identify articles that are about artists related to their collections that they think need work or are missing completely. But sometimes we have students go down there and work on different lists and different topics. So one that we did recently with the American Art Museum is to go through, for Black History Month, the list of 50-some Harlem Renaissance artists that were listed in the American Art Museum catalog, but had articles of varying quality in Wikipedia. We actually had our students go through and do the ORAS rev score, automated rev score for each of those articles. And we actually did that, in one sitting, and then we actually set up the edit-a-thon task for the next edit-a-thon, which is happening a few days later on the exact same topic. So it was nice to see that our students could do a lot of the behind-the-scenes research that made it easier for new editors of Wikipedia to do their task by identifying kind of the low-hanging fruit, or the articles that need the most work through this rev score system. So I think that's kind of a novel way of doing that.
Oh, for sure. So I think two tips come out of what you just said. The first is have awesome Glam relationships, because that allows you really to use Wikipedia, as you said, as sort of a hub that connects both Glam's experts from cultural institutions and education experts together. So really bringing these two types to one place where all the work is happening. And the second, and of course, creating these lists in advance, which is really helpful, because some students get stuck even thinking about what it is that they want to edit, right? I'm sure you've also had that experience. So it's really helpful to not only have some kind of list to help students focus, and of course, as you said, work on a thematic, work on a theme. Make sure that you cover articles in the same field to make an impact, to improve them. So these are two things that people can actually do in advance to make sure that it's what it is that they're doing is more successful. And I think it's of course, you're talking about Glam and how you collaborate with Glam, which is amazing, that you can take your students and actually meet curators and let them experience all of that is amazing. Not everybody is in DC, but I think it's important to note that many educational institutions do have libraries inside the academic institutions. So I think that's maybe the first and most the basic place where things can start blooming. Yeah, contact your library on campus and start working with them if you don't have a Glam in the city that that you're working in. So you can always find a way. It doesn't have to be a major Glam. It could be a small archive or a small museum, and you can still do amazing stuff collaborating with them and making, and the benefit is for both the students and the general public, of course. And I think the curators love it as well. They like to see that their expertise are being used and somehow continue to live on Wiki. So that's an amazing thing for them as well. And this brings me, of course, because we talk about Glam, and um, it brings me to think about your course, which is called Wikipedia and Communication, or something of the sort. I mean, the word Wikipedia is in the name of your class,
Right.
and obviously the focus is Wikipedia. But do you, as an educator, expose your students to other wiki projects? Wikipedia obviously has lots of sister projects. Do you use them how to use Commons? Do you give them assignments in Wikibooks, Wiktionary, and of course Wikidata, which
Right.
is everybody's favorites these days?
Yeah, so the name of the class is called Wikipedia and Public Knowledge. And it's part of my general goal is to see the goals of journalism and historical record and what we do in Wikipedia is all part of the same thing, right? When I first started my research in Wikipedia back in 2003, even before I wrote my book, it was very hard to convince people in my discipline of journalism communications why I was studying an encyclopedia. The thinking was very conservative, saying encyclopedias, that's not journalism. And I would have to make the argument with every grant request or every paper, or I'd have a long preamble explaining why I thought Wikipedia was an active journalism. And now I've kind of framed this all as everything dealing with knowledge in the public interest is what I would consider journalism, or a form of journalism. In that sense, Wikipedia is absolutely in the same category, right? Of anyone dealing with knowledge in the public interest, not of a corporate interest, not of a biased viewpoint, but for knowledge in the public interest, whether it's an act of journalism, whether it's an act of history writing, whether it's an act of linking data in Wikidata, or anything in that realm is an act of journalism. And I think we've come far enough that I can make that argument pretty strongly today. But it wasn't always that easy. It took 10 plus years for people to be convinced that Wikipedia was a form of journalism. And that's partly why I have this class, is to explore the fact that there's a very fluid spectrum that we are dealing with here, whether we're talking about history writing or about breaking news reporting, and Wikipedia being in the center of all this stuff. So another thing that you touched on is one of my favorite, other projects out there. And I think with that framework, I would be interested in Wiki News. Now, sadly, I'm not particularly interested in Wiki News because Wiki News has largely been a dormant project for a while now. There's not to say that I didn't give it a chance. When Wiki News was first proposed back, I think in 2005 or so, I was very skeptical. I was a journalism professor at the time. I said, I just don't think that the Wiki model worked well with deadlines. I don't think the Wiki model would compete well with AP and Reuters and these newswires. But if you guys want to give it a go, I'm happy to entertain you folks, or entertain that idea. But I would give it a try. I was even one of the first accredited Wiki News folks out there. I went to the WTO 2005 conference in Hong Kong. I got accredited as a Wiki News photographer and reporter. And I actually did file some stuff from the WTO conference and protests and photos, things like that. But Wiki News has really never taken off. You look at the numbers today, there's maybe like 5 or 10 active people. It's very, very low traffic. So Wiki News is not that interesting a project to me, but Wikidata has been really interesting. And I think Wikidata is the key to a lot of cool things regarding multimedia, timelines. Structured data is just great for complex queries and exploring data. So right now in Wikipedia, it's all prose, it's got info boxes, it's got some categories, but it's not very wieldy for a lot of interesting manipulation or database functions. And Wikidata, as more information gets there, is not only the key to interesting visualization and navigation, but I think for contributions, if you look at things like the Wikidata game, which presents things for you to match or to move from Wikipedia into Wikidata, these are things you can easily do on your mobile phone, whereas straight up wiki markup editing is really complex and really hard to do on your mobile phone. This is a trend you see a lot now with engagement, which is trying to do, micro engagements versus the very intense engagements. If you ask someone to edit a Wikipedia article, you need to sit down in front of a computer, open up a browser, open up the article, maybe 5 or 10 different pages on policy, on markup, on research and references and Google searching. That's what we would call like appointment computing. You really need to carve out a chunk of your time to do that.
Completely.
Yeah, so what if you could, standing in line for McDonald's or waiting in line for tickets, you could just, what we call info snack, and say, here are 10 tasks you can do in Wikidata today. Is this author male or female? Okay, well, it says he, yeah, it's a male. Or you can say, who is the author of this book? Wikipedia says it's this, Wikidata is empty, tell us who it is, and you can match those things. And that's what things like the Wikidata game allow you to do. And it's really interesting, and there's leaderboards, and there is a gamification of this. I think there's some really interesting models where we can engage a whole new set of folks in editing Wikipedia and Wikidata and Wikimedia projects based on this new kind of micro engagement dynamic that you have on mobiles, if we were only more bold in doing this. I know a lot of folks in the Wikimedia universe think that people should be sitting down and being very thoughtful editors of Wikipedia, but we think we need to think of other modes of engagement that bring in new publics to this project, because we know that sticking with our existing model, we could see a long-term slow decline in our engagement numbers when we could easily be engaging folks on mobiles in a different way with something like Wikidata.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, my students have tried all the Wikidata games, and they completely got hooked really fast. And some of the students who didn't really get didn't like the Wikipedia assignments because, again, as you said, it takes a lot of time, and you have to allocate chunks of time to do it, and it's hard. It takes a lot of studying. You need to know a lot to actually do something small. And here, these games allow you to contribute instantly. So yeah, I think we're going to see much more Wikidata games, and I think in that sense, Wikipedia, or our movement, is finally taking steps to, as you said, sometimes we can be a bit behind. And gamification, which you've mentioned, is a global trend, not only in our movement and with Wikidata. It's about an approach to studying, and we, as educators, we see it everywhere. We see more and more sort of games that teach small children even how to write code, like, and we can see all kinds of companies like Code Monkey, and I think it's called Scratch, all kinds of companies who try to teach complex things using games. And there's no reason why our community shouldn't benefit from from folks, standing in line, as you said, maybe not for McDonald's, but in any case, the moment you have a free time on the train, wherever you can, just go in, edit via your cell phone, which is, again, more and more popular. So for sure, we're going to see more Wikidata stuff. So I'm curious, talking about Wikidata and gamification, what else do you expose your students to besides Wikipedia? And do they really get assignments that are related to those things, or is it just, improving Wikipedia articles?
Well, last year we had an interesting side project that I had a grant from the Knight Foundation to create something called Wikipedia Space. And the idea here was that we wanted to think of a way of enhancing editathons. And typically, at least here in Wikimedia DC, we run so many, but they kind of fall into the same pattern of people show up in a room that's empty, and you wait until the appointed time where someone goes up to the front of the room, they turn on the projector, and they give it a 10, 15-minute quick tutorial on how to edit Wikipedia, and then it just all kind of goes freeform at that point, right? It says, okay, well, here's the page, here's the Etherpad, and go to this page and find an article you'd like to work on, and roll up your sleeves and start working. And it's very, it's very self-motivated or self-identifying what you're interested in. And sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating for newbies, right? There's a lot of policy pages to understand, a lot of syntax to understand, and then you're kind of thrown into this open-ended task saying, you just learned about all this new stuff. Now you've got to find it in yourself to identify something you want to work on. That's a lot of unknowns. So one of the projects that I proposed with the Knight Foundation that got funding is this thing called Wikipedia Space, and this idea to come up with this mini exhibit that we have at editathons that kind of explain the fundamentals of Wikipedia, right? The policies, NPOV, reliable sourcing, verifiability, the basics of wiki markup, how does Wikimedia Commons work, and what kinds of things have we done with Glam entities. So it's what we call these pull-up banners that we often see at expos or at even in front of a fast food shop, right? And the idea here is to make this mini traveling exhibit so that people who show up these editathons can get a very basic overview in these 5, 2-meter tall panels, just to understand the basics of Wikipedia, even before the editathon starts. And the nice thing about this, if you have veteran Wikipedia editors, you can kind of stand around and have them in front of the posters, and then people can kind of go up there and start discussions, even before the editathon starts, saying things like, oh, Commons, it doesn't allow for fair use. Oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. I didn't know that. And then you can start a conversation around how to upload images and what's acceptable, not acceptable. People might point to this chart and say, reliable sources, what are those? Would Fox News be a reliable source? Would CNN be a reliable source? They can get conversations happening before these editathons start, or even during the editathon. So this is just an idea to start providing more and better learning resources when you're in face-to-face situations. I think we rely way too much on the fact that, oh, all this is online. As long as you got a web browser, just open up 15 tabs and just read them all online. I think it's very intimidating. It's still very intimidating for me. I need to work up the mental energy to deal with, 15 tabs and finding the right one, and how do I format this reference to a movie? I've never done that before. Oh, it's too much of a bother. Forget it. I'm not going to do it. Right. So the idea here is to try to lower as much the cognitive load on new people learning Wikipedia. So my class helped design a lot of these posters that we wound up using, and now they're on permanent display at the National Archives in DC, at the Innovation Hub. So it's great. We actually now have a semi-permanent exhibit about Wikipedia at the National Archives in their Innovation Hub, which is a huge step for us to have that presence there.
Yeah. It's quite amazing, and again, I think we have lots of examples around the world of students making huge impacts. So it's not just, it becomes more than just coming to another class and putting a V. Okay, I went to class between 10 to 12. You actually do something that remains after class, and it gives students a really good feeling, I think. And I think I have a few final questions. They're a bit more technical to the folks who actually teach and want to use Wikipedia. And the first of those last questions is, well, we have to touch on it. Copy pasting. It happens all the time. Every educator knows it. It doesn't matter the age, how much you've talked about it. It happens. So how do you monitor it? Do you give it? Do you talk about it with your students? Do you let them maybe use one of the copy pasting tools to try to monitor? How do you go about it?
Fortunately, last few years I have not had much problem with it. And when I first started teaching, even when I would admonish them, it just happened in such large amounts. It was a disaster for the first few days that we had it. We had to basically roll back a lot of the edits that they made. Also, fortunately, the community is a lot friendlier back then. They didn't ban people outright for doing those things. But I'm lucky in the last few years, I think I've hit a formula where the first day we really do emphasize the fact that you cannot copy paste into Wikipedia. We talk about the basic types of intellectual property, right? So whether it's trademark, patent, copyright, and then plagiarism as part of that. We said that summarizing is what Wikipedia is all about. Paraphrasing, summarizing, rewriting, but direct copy and pasting from sites on the internet, just assume it is forbidden. Even forbidden unless proven to be absolutely acceptable, such as public domain works and things like that. But in general, assume that no copying and pasting is allowed. And we start off with that premise at the very first day. Not to say I put the fear of God into them, but I make it very, very clear that that is a mode of operation unacceptable in Wikipedia. And there's a reason for that. And I guess it also depends a lot on whether the students in a particular university or the culture that you come from has certain safeguards built in or certain expectations. So we know that places like Hong Kong, China, maybe India, they're a much more, I wouldn't say lax about this, but they don't really drill it into students early on, right? Sometimes it takes some re-education in these areas to get students convinced that this is the norm.
Right. So you basically talk about it a lot, and hopefully they're not doing it. Do you check? Or you just leave it to you let it live on Wiki and see what happens? How does that work?
I do some spot checks. I can't say it's necessarily thorough, but for large editions, I will do a spot check and see where they're referencing stuff from. I can usually tell pretty quickly because the writing style of students is quite different than ones you would copy and paste. But but depending on the students that you have, whether they are first or second years versus third, fourth, or grad student, I think it makes a big difference. So some of the students just coming into college, depending on where they were coming from before they went to college, might have bad habits that need breaking. I'm lucky. I think I've always taught upperclassmen at this level for my Wikipedia class. So they've had that habit, even if they had it before, beaten out of them, and they know better by that point. But that may not be the case for every region of the world. Yeah,
for sure not. But again, I think it's a matter of finding the balance as you go along. Sounds like you found yours. It obviously works, and you don't need to worry too much about that. So this brings me, of course, to feedback and how you give feedback. And I think you mentioned something really important before. You said it's not only about giving them the assignments, but it's about making them reflect and really think about what it is that changed and what it is that they did. I think it's a really important point. But again, students are students and they want a grade at the end. So how do you go about the grading of your course? How do you give them feedback? Do you use peer review? How does that work from your experience?
Yeah, I've changed this over the years with varying levels of success. Sometimes I use peer review. I considered doing that this year with Joseph Riegel. I don't know if you talked to Joseph Riegel recently, but he teaches at Northeastern. He's also the author of a book on Wikipedia, and he did his whole PhD thesis on Wikipedia. So he's a great resource to have. So we were considering swapping our classes and having my students review theirs, and the timing didn't really work out for us. But I definitely encourage folks to experiment in that area to find other professors teaching with Wikipedia and maybe swap students to peer review each other just to see how things go. I tend to try to do things in a classroom setting. So a lot of the times I use liberal use of Google Docs. So one of the great things about wikis is they're collaborative, but they're not simultaneously collaborative, right? I'm sure anyone who's hit the edit conflict button or edit conflict screen is like, oh my gosh, I got to resolve this edit conflict. And it's actually kind of slow collaborative versus live collaborative. And so we use Google Docs a lot, and often I will tell students to go into a table that I've set up with every single student with a different row and say, go in there and show me the most problematic thing you saw on Wikipedia this week. And then we have everyone fill it in, and then we can discuss those very quickly. Show me the most interesting thing you found when evaluating this article, and then I will have them kind of start discussions around this list of things that they create online. So I do like either Etherpad or Google Docs for these types of things, where I try to get students to discuss amongst themselves. We do a lot of this kind of quick evaluation in class. We try to combine the knowledge that they've had from the assignments right after they've done them to start discussion points around trends that they saw. So, for example, one of the things that we did recently was try to analyze the articles around breaking news, and we wanted to try to see what trends we saw in editor behavior when the information was still murky and not really determined for sure in the news cycle. And this is where we try to give students immediate feedback, as the news is happening. Now, in terms of evaluation and assessment, that's really hard. In general, I try to not necessarily go with, whether the edit stuck or how many bytes they added to an article or whether they reached featured article status. I base most of their grade on their reflection and what they learned. Were they being critical thinkers in this process? Like, it's fine to say, I tried to add these 5 facts and some grumpy editor would not allow me to add them, and I got into a dispute, and on the top page, here's what I said and here's what he said, and we couldn't agree. Like, even that, you can get an A in. Right? You can get an A in the assignment where you tried to engage, you had your strengths, they had their arguments, and you could never resolve it, but you learned something from the process, right? So I try to make sure that bringing an article to a certain status or having a certain number of bytes added is not the yardstick for the assignment, and that every assignment is always around a deeper understanding of the dynamics of Wikipedia, not necessarily in bringing an article to a better status.
Yeah. So you basically give them lots of smaller assignments, and then they have like a big assignment at the end, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I give a lot of smaller assignments, which are editing 1 article or 3 articles, or backtracking an article, looking at the article traffic stats. What does this tell us about the nature of this article? But then at the end, I have a big kind of wrap-up project where I've given them kind of a choice in the past. So one can be kind of like a Glam report card / report for a Glam entity. So in the past, we've had 2 students do a whole report for a Smithsonian museum saying, here are the visual assets from your museum on Wikipedia. Here's how much they've been accessed. So it's kind of like the Glam report card on steroids, and they build it out and they kind of visually show, here are the images from your collection that have the most accesses and from which countries. So I thought that was kind of nice. It's kind of a big Glam report card expanded for a museum, and they actually send it off to the contact that we have there, and hopefully it's useful for them. Another thing that we have an option is to hack Wikipedia in some way to make it more useful. This could be a policy thing. It could be a new practice on Wikipedia. If they're so inclined, it can be a technical feature they can either propose or experiment with. So one of the examples was to not just hack, but also to study. So one of the analysis that one student did was to look at all the featured pictures for 3 months on Commons and to find out trends, like how many were nature photos, how many were original creations by people who created them just for Commons, how many were imported from Flickr, how many were public domain. And I don't think anyone has ever done those stats before. So it was quite interesting to see the trends that they saw and looking at 3 months worth of featured media or pictures on the front page of Commons, and to see what trends there were in the multimedia that's featured there. So those are kind of, I guess it's 3 different types of things. One is hacking Wikipedia, another is measuring Wikipedia, and the third one is more Glam oriented, but kind of reporting to a Glam entity, what their Wikimedia footprint looks like. And maybe, I suggested to them, suggesting where in the Wikimedia ecosystem they could have an impact. So for example, if they weren't uploading videos, you could say to them, hey, there's a whole section for videos relating to modern art that has really no contributions, and by uploading some things from your collection, you could have a high impact in those areas.
Yeah, so how do you measure in any way your class impact as a class?
We've really never done that in terms of measuring the overall class impact on Wikipedia. I suppose that would be an interesting exercise.
Okay. And I think two last questions. One relates to your end. I mean, the teachers and the instructor and the workload in terms of running such a course. And the second is the student experience. I think you've mentioned again that they give you a lot of feedback and they reflect a lot about the process. So can you tell us a bit how you experience it as someone who runs it, including all the administrative sides, which there are a lot of. At least it sounds like it, especially if you deal with GLAMs and parts of your sessions are not even in the institutions, but you go to other places, you have to coordinate it. It relates to lists and editathons and et cetera, et cetera. And well, how do students experience it?
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but fortunately, this is something I really love doing. So it is your classic labor of love. Yeah, it's one of those things where this is something I'd be wanting to do anyway. So by getting students involved with it, it is actually sharing something that I'm really happy to be in DC doing with folks that we hopefully can make long-term editors of Wikipedia. Now, unfortunately, the numbers that I see are pretty much consistent with most other classes, I believe, which is that the yield of making a long-term Wikipedia editor from these classes is actually very, very low. So I'd be surprised if one student per semester becomes a prolific long-term contributor of Wikipedia. And that's okay. I don't think we necessarily need to be convinced that every student we put through an intense Wikipedia class becomes a prolific administrator or something like that. But even understanding Wikipedia better and appreciating what goes on behind the scenes, and maybe working in the field of either PR or journalism in the future and understanding that and being able to navigate Wikipedia better for an institution or for their own work, I think is a great outcome of this. And you never know exactly how they might get involved in the future, whether it's multimedia or Wikidata in some way. Yeah, and I'm really lucky that the Wikimedia DC chapter has a lot of active folks, so it's not unusual for all these editathons, which are also open to the public, right? Except for a handful. We always say that these editathons that I set up for my class are also open to the public. We have at least 2 or so Wikimedia DC folks who show up to help, either train curators or people who want to stop by, and even my students. So when my students had questions about, oh, how do I use a template? How do I include this category? Why did my article get deleted? We'd have folks, from the community there to very quickly explain things or intervene if their article gets deleted. And that is a real help to have that community around.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point that we haven't stressed maybe before. Be involved with your local community. Folks can help, some of them, if they can come in and join, and they can also, help the course. So work with the community. It's really important. And lastly, again, what is the experience of your students? I mean, what do they report? Do they like it? Do they enjoy it? What are some of the feedbacks that you got from students?
Yeah, I think they really liked the insight into Wikipedia, and I keep telling them that just by making it through my class, they're an elite. They have an elite understanding of what happens in Wikipedia that very few other people know about. That even if they're not hardcore editors, like very few people ever look at the edit history. Very few people ever get into a discussion with someone on there. Very few people ever find the traffic stats. So even just showing them some of these secret menus that the rest of the world never sees, like traffic stats and article stats on who's the top contributor here, and what does the log look like behind the scenes, they already feel like they are getting the secret tour of Wikipedia that no one else gets. And so just being able to navigate that better, I think the students really appreciate it because they use it so much. They really never knew all the effort that went on behind the scenes to get them there. And I think that's something that that's something that they appreciate quite a bit.
Do your students also report really appreciating the fact that some of their work is out there on Wiki and they show it to friends, and really, I don't know, some of my students really boast about it, and post their articles on Facebook, and tell to their families, and really have what is a meaningful learning experience. So I'm curious if that's something that you see as well.
Yeah, I wish they got more excited about it, and I'm trying to. I thought it was universal, but maybe I need to do a better job of making them super excited. Yeah, so I keep telling them the story of David Schenkbone, right? So I don't know if he's that well known these days, but for years, David Schenkbone was known as like Wikipedia's photographer, right? In fact, if you go back and look on the net, you'll see articles dedicated to David Schenkbone as being probably the world's most widely viewed photographer, simply because he, as a professional photographer, donated so much stuff to Commons and just have pictures of celebrities, but also of daily life on Wikipedia. And I told my students, just through your own enthusiasm, you could have a prolific contribution to Wikipedia or career there, simply because you felt like it, and simply because you were creative and you were spending the energy to do so. Go and be an expert in something and own that corner of Wikipedia. Not own as an ownership, but own it in terms of being the most prolific person in that space. And this is a recommendation I give to anyone, not just in Wikipedia, is just be a scholar about something. Doesn't matter if you think it's frivolous or it's not as heavy duty as French literature or something like that, but try to be the expert or a scholar in something. And what better place to do that than Wikipedia, is to carve out a certain portion of Wikipedia and say, let me make this as excellent and as educational and well-sourced and high quality as I can. And only certain types of people get a real rush out of that, I suppose. This is always the debate in Wikipedia. It's like, are Wikipedians made or are they born? I don't know what your opinion is, but I'm convinced. I used to think, as an educator, this is a really hard question, right? To me, I'd like to think that Wikipedians, anyone can be a Wikipedian. But over the years, I think we all recognize that that's not the case, that Wikipedians are probably born more than they're made. But through classes like ours and through the education efforts like this, we can surface these born Wikipedians in a way that maybe they would never have been discovered before, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think it's like you always it's not only in Wikipedia. I mean, in any profession that you'll think of, there will always be the folks who were born with the gift, like someone who's really good in music, or who can paint wonderfully from a really early age. But there are people who can actually grow into it, so to speak. I mean, can learn how to do it. And I think today, more and more, I think it's more about making people or helping people find the right way they can contribute. Just like we talked before, it doesn't have to be a full article. You can add photos. You can help to make Wikidata better. You can, I don't know, write, I don't know, you can use Wikiquote. There are all sorts of ways to contribute. So just find what suits you and go ahead. So yeah, so it's not about becoming a Wikipedian anymore. I mean, at least not for me. But again, that's been my experience. Because again, we talk a lot about diversity, and I think that's exactly the point of being diverse and allowing all types of people to contribute on all sorts of ways and platforms. And yeah, I guess we'll see. Time will tell.
I think you hit it on the head. The famous cartoon that I think Wikipedians can sympathize with is the XKCD comic, where has a guy sitting at a computer and there's a voice saying, "Honey, come to bed," and he goes, "No, I can't, there's someone wrong on the internet," and he has to stay there in front of the computer, right? I think that's your classic Wikipedian, right? But the funny thing is, so if that cartoon doesn't resonate with you, you're probably not a Wikipedia editor, because a Wikipedia editor sees something wrong and just must fix it, or someone must die, right? But I think, as we talked about with Wikidata, can we engage another type of person, like someone who plays the Wikidata game by matching the gender of a book, gender of the author of a book to the Wikidata item, is not necessarily there's someone wrong on the internet type of person. It's someone who maybe wants to see the same Candy Crush kind of person. Like, I just did 1,000 today. Let me see if I can do 2,000 today. Let me see if I can do 3,000 today. That's not someone who necessarily wants to, correct someone on the internet. This is someone who's motivated by something else. And I think that's great if we can engage a different type of person versus saying everyone who becomes a Wikimedia editor, has to be that kind of XKCD kind of guy who wants to correct it.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. And on that optimistic note, let's hope more games are found and built, and better tools, and I don't know, and more people engaged with whatever it is that we do for lots and lots of our free time. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today and just sharing your experience. I'm sure, so many important things came up today, and I'm sure it's going to be very helpful to folks around the world trying to get a program started, or even people who run programs for a long time and got some cool ideas from you. So thanks so much. I hope people enjoyed it, and I'll see you all on the next video, I guess.
Yeah, and thanks for letting me use this for a second time as a podcast episode. It's a great thing to do.
Cool. Very, very happy to. So good night, everyone, from Tel Aviv and from DC, which is right. It's noon there right now. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you.